Welcome, welcome. This is module 9 on protein. Do you realize that we only have four more classes, right? And then the final. We're almost there. Woohoo! So, you can start thinking about signing up for food science. It starts whenever, in the near future, sometime. I'm planning a trip to Japan, so I'm wondering, did I set it up so that when does it start?
Jill, I was just in Japan for 2 weeks for work. So if you want some tips and pointers, I'm your girl.
All right, Laura. Yeah, we'll talk. We'll
Okay.
talk. Yeah. Yeah, we will start. Well, we're not going to start food science until after I get back. So, September 25th. But if you could register before I leave, I'm leaving the 31st of August. That would be super, super nice so I could get things sort of set up before we go. So if you remember, the registration process is you sign up and register and then you pay me. So it's two different things, right? Register on SurveyMonkey and pay me either direct or through PayPal. So
Jill, what if I did it at the beginning when when I registered for this one?
that I'll give you credit. I'll do that. But did you register for both as well as pay for both?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I paid for both. I don't know if I registered for both.
John, I'll check it and I'll let you know.
Okay, all right.
I probably have that. So my record keeping is a little iffy, but I think I can figure that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So this is module 9. Next week will be functional ingredients, those like additives and things. So that's what we're going to do next week. And next week specifically, we're going to talk about acidulants and alkalis, or acids and bases and buffers, and pH. And what's the difference between pH and titration, and a little bit about those. We'll also talk about water and salt. And maybe we'll go back to emulsions again, God forbid. Anyways, last week there was a question about on emulsions, and it had to do with the statement adding salts or acids may reduce stability, especially if the emulsifier is a protein. So you guys were after me to explain that. So first of all, I had to figure out what is a protein emulsifier. So common examples of those are casein and whey, egg proteins, soy proteins, and pea proteins. So now I know the answer to that question. So proteins function based on their shape. And if the shape is disrupted, then they cannot function. So adding an acid is one way to do that. And you would recognize that if you made ceviche, for instance, right? So you cook it by adding an acid, right? And that cooks the proteins and changes the color of them. And that the change in the color and texture, that's indication that they have been that they have coagulated, and so that they no longer function. So does that make sense? So proteins function based on the shape of the molecule, and anything we add to that to the food, it could be shear, it could be an acid or a base, or it could be heat. And all of those will disrupt the shape. And so the protein will no longer work as an emulsifier. Is that a clear answer? Yeah. All right. Yay. I did go through the article a little bit, and there are some really interesting things, because one of the things we were discussing was mayonnaise in salads and how it breaks down, and it's hard to handle in a salad, and gets watery and stuff and it breaks down. So other things that were in this article that I thought were interesting was that low temperatures may harden the fat phase. So if if you go from an oil to a solid, like, then that's gonna break your emulsion. And high temperatures are gonna cause your little droplets to coagulate into bigger droplets. So temperature changing in your product, if it gets too cold or too hot, is going to affect the emulsion of the mayonnaise, right? So that might be one of the things that happens. Um, common emulsifiers, they work really well. Let's see where to go. Oh, down here. If the viscosity of the continuous phase is higher. So remember I said the droplets are the dispersed phase and the water or oil, depending on, is the continuous phase, the part that's between the droplets. So if you can add a gum or something to make your continuous phase a little thicker, then that's going to make a difference too. So that might be using a emulsifier that has a really small droplet size will make for a more stable one. And I think that's what we were talking about when we were talking about making a hollandaise that's actually stable in the kitchen. And I was being educated about that. And I think that by mixing it correctly, we get that. If the densities between the two phases can be similar, so that, like the water is thickened, and the oil, so that the density of those two is about the same. So anyway, the article goes on to say that droplet size is probably the most important. So if mayonnaise is an issue for you, go back and read that article. This is where I got it from. That's what I went back to. Any questions about this? No? Does that kind of answer the question better? Good.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, Laura, and you might want to go back and read that article. Then also some of you that were struggling with processing, there's some discussion of processing in that article. All right, moving on to proteins. So identifying structure and muscle composition. So I'm going to talk about muscles a little bit. Relative collagen content of meat tenderness. Understand that. Relative collagen content. I think it should say and meat tenderness, right? The more collagen, the less tender, the less so I think that's kind of miswritten. The benefits of marination, aging you did as your homework. I'm going to talk about the Maillard reaction. And then you went through and looked at the primal cut and commercial cuts on your homework. I want to talk a little bit about nutritional value, and I want to talk a little bit about alternative proteins, just a little bit about protein combining. And then I want to spend some extra time on red meat and the color in meat. Most people struggle with that, so I want to spend a little time on that. So, and if there's anything else that comes up, I'll try and answer. So starting with the easy stuff, nutrition. Protein is always considered by many people to be the first and the most important part of our human nutrition. I don't know, but I think they're all important. Protein provides 4 calories per gram. And on average, Americans consume 16% of their daily calories in the form of protein. Protein is the muscles, the tendons, our organs, our hair, our nails, enzymes, and hormones. So protein is all of those. That's where it is. Protein is not stored in the body in any significant amount. We can store a lot of fat and even a little bit of carbohydrate as glycogen, but we don't store any extra protein. So it's important that we get a protein on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be exactly in every meal, but spread out over the day. We talked about protein as a percentage of calories. So it can range from as little as 10% in a vegan diet up to 35% in a totally, what do they call it? Well, high protein diet.
Or 100% in a carnivore diet.
Or 100%?
In a carnivore diet.
Can't be 100% of your calories, Trevor, because even in the carnivore diet, you have some fat.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
right. So
talking when
it
I
can't be
say
100% of the calories.
I'm speaking generally, like as when you say protein, people automatically think meat, which contains protein, fat, and everything else along with it.
Right. So I'm talking just about the protein part,
Okay.
not meat, not meat per se, right? So so just the protein part. If you think that fat has 9 calories per gram, so if you had 1 gram of each, the 1 gram of protein is going to be 33% of your calories, and the 1 gram of fat is going to be 66% of your calories, just because it has twice as many calories as protein. But at any rate, there's a wide range. And that's fortunate for us because we can have a wide range of diets depending on what our personal interests and attitudes are. The daily value on the food label is 50 grams based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So 50 times 4 is 200 calories. Yeah. The recommended allowance that this was based on is 0.8 grams of good quality protein per kilogram of body weight. So that's what we've always used in research. And when they've researched that, so a kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So let's say it's about 3.5 grams per pound of body weight would be the recommendation. And you know that the recommended dietary allowances are based on a reference man and a reference woman. And the reference man is, I think, by today's standard, relatively small. He's, I believe it's 5'8" and 150 or 160 pounds. So by today's standards, that's pretty small, right? But when they were doing the research on this, that's what was the reference man. But it doesn't make any difference, right? Because obviously somebody who's larger than that doesn't need more per pound, but they need more per day, right? Because there are more pounds. So the reference hasn't changed that much. But the reference man, I think, is about that. I think the reference woman is 5'5". You can look, I put a reference in here. This one right here, you can calculate your DRI for whatever for protein would be, and that would be based on the 0.8 grams of good quality protein. Remember, good quality, we'll talk about protein quality. Remember that quality and quantity are not the same thing when we come to protein. There's also this other article, Health Publishing, on how much protein do we need every day. We probably need less than what we think we do. If we consume more protein than necessary, we use that extra protein for energy. It is not stored. So what I mean by that is it's converted and it's expensive. It's hard for the body to do this because the nitrogen has to be removed. But what happens is the liver removes the nitrogen and then the remaining parts are used as calories. So it's expensive to buy and it's a little difficult, not really that difficult, but it's a little bit difficult for the body to metabolize. So extra protein beyond, exceedingly beyond what we need on a daily basis is going to be converted into calories and used for energy. Does that make sense? Questions about that? Okay. So where we get protein, obviously we get protein from animals, beef, poultry, pork, milk, eggs, cheese, but we also can get, and this is what a vegetarian or a vegan diet is based on, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and vegetables all have some protein in them. So protein quality is determined by the number and amount of essential amino acids. So there are 8 essential amino acids, and this is what they're called. And you can think of them like the letters of an alphabet, for instance, right? Or like Lego building blocks. So these are 8 essential ones. Some people say 9. Did I list the 9th one? I did list the 9th one here. So one of those is only important in children. So some people say 8 or 9 essential ones. And what that means is the body can either not manufacture them, or we cannot manufacture them in enough for us, to use, right? For enough for us based on our needs. So that's why they're essential. Essential always means that we have to have it in the diet in order to be healthy. So of the 21 amino acids, 9 of these are essential. You don't have to know the names. That's not important. So how we build protein is the first thing that happens is we build a long chain. So if we look at the inside our mitochondria, where our DNA is, where they're going to build it, the DNA says, okay, here's the directions for my Lego chain, right? I'm going to need 1 red one, 1 blue one, 1 green one, 1 red one, 1 green one, 1 blue one. And in order in which those put together, that's my genetic, that's the DNA, what the DNA is based on. And then once that order is established, and so in the mitochondria, if it's going to build, let's say, and it needs an orange one, a green one, a pink one, an orange one, a green one, oh my gosh, no more pink ones? It can't build that protein. It can't build the protein so that it's malfunctioning. So it takes it all apart and tries to build something else. So that's why having all of the essential amino acids is important. Once that order is established, then there's an intertwining of the chains, and we'll talk about this in food science, but it kind of like if you took a string and you went twist, 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 and it folds back up on top of each other, and that's what forms the shape. So your DNA determines the order, and then the order determines the shape. So when I was talking earlier about heat and proteins, I was saying that if the shape is disrupted, then if that happens, then the protein no longer functions. It doesn't function as an emulsifier, as a hormone, as an enzyme, or as fingernails, or whatever it's going to be. Questions? Nope. Okay. So moving on, for protein, we consider the following. We consider quantity, right? Quantity, how much of each individual amino acid. Quality, are all the essential amino acids there in the amounts that we need. And then we also have to look at digestibility. Let's say it's a soy product and we can't digest the outside kernel or husk, then those amino acids are not available. We use a score, and I think we've talked about this before, I pronounce it PDCAS. It means protein quality. That's not what it means. Anyway, that's what it's in the World Health Organization. This is what they use to determine the quality of proteins. So you can see here that these down here at the bottom, right there, those three are all animal proteins. So animal proteins have the all animal proteins except for gelatin, which comes from collagen, except for gelatin, have all of the essential amino acids in the right quantity and they're easily absorbed. Soy protein isolate is the closest, the isolate, not just soy, but soy protein isolate is the closest of the plant proteins. And then it goes downhill. You can see that the protein quality goes downhill, looking at these green ones that are all from plants. Again, quality has to do with the amount and to make sure that we have all 9 of the essential amino acids present. Oh, there we go. For me, who can never remember the name of this, protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. And how they figure that out? They feed mice, I think. Right. So a perfect score is 1 and everything else is less than. Again, animal proteins are complete proteins. That's what we say, except for gelatin, like Jell-O, because it doesn't contain any tryptophan. Most of the vegetable proteins are missing or low in 1 or more essential amino acids, and this is called their limiting amino acid. But obviously there's a whole segment of the world, that lives mostly on plant foods, right? Vegetarians and other cultures where they can't afford a lot of meat. So how can we get a complete protein if we're not eating a lot of animal foods? Well, we do what we call is protein combining, and we combine what we call complementary proteins. And if we look at the foods right here, and we look at this chart, we can see that legumes are limited in the essential amino acid tryptophan and methionine. But if we go down here and look at but if we combine that with grains right here, so let's say we have red beans and rice, right? Then we have a complete protein, right? Because we have some of the grains and nuts and seeds are missing different amino acids that the legumes are high in. So the two of those put together make for a complete protein. Peanut butter on bread, right? Red beans and rice, vegetables and rice in the Asian culture. All successful cultures have some vegetarian combination that makes for a complete protein. We can see down here, cornbread and chili beans. Anytime you add a animal source to that, let's say you put in an egg or you put on cheese, then you're going to get a complete protein. But if we just look at the vegan ones, then you have to be more careful. So personally, I think a vegetarian diet is easily achieved to have a nutritious vegetarian diet. I think vegan diets and anything more restrictive than that make it very difficult in our society and our culture to be successful. I also do not think that vegan diets are appropriate for young children. So because they need so many more nutrients per calorie than we do. Any questions about this?
I have a question.
Yes, Lynn.
So is digestibility of protein same as bioavailability of protein? For example, some minerals from animal source and plant source, the bioavailability, as far as I know, is different. I'm wondering for protein, is it the same?
That's a really good question that you bring up. So bioavailability is, let's say, if you take your iron with a vitamin C source, right, then it's more easily absorbed. Digestibility has more to do with the ability to digest the food itself, right? Doesn't have much to do with the absorption. So, for instance, if it has a hull on it, or that's something that's hard to digest because it has a lot of fiber with it, right? That's more digestibility than bioavailability. Does that answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Jill.
You're welcome. Okay. Because you can see here, like some of these things are nuts and seeds, for instance, which are not nearly as digestible as animal proteins, which are almost 100% digestible. Nuts and seeds, not so much because of the fiber. Anyway, we'll talk about this again later on. Come on. There's my dog. Yeah. Wait a minute. Stop. There we go. Okay. So now let's go back to Trevor with his red meat, right? So red meat per se is about 75% water. Oops. 75% water, 19% protein, and 2.5% fat. Actually, right out before rigor mortis has about 1.2% carbohydrate, but the process of rigor mortis really consumes that carbohydrate, the glycogen, so it can be quite a bit less. And then, of course, it has some minerals in it, some iron and other minerals that are about 2.3%. So that's for red meat. And red meat is the skeletal muscle, is the primary component of red meat. We generally don't talk about the organ meats, but they're kind of the same. It's fibrous. In other words, the protein structures are long and long fibular, fibrous versus globular like globs. So they look like long fibers. The primary proteins are actin and myosin, which form to combine actomyosin. So if we look at this meat fiber here, which I think somebody asked about before. So if we look here at the meat fiber, down here at the bottom, this is the smallest cell. The smallest cell down here, this one down here. And the way it contracts is you see all these little tiny barbs on it, a little bit like Velcro, right? So the way it contracts is that it catches on itself and it contracts. And when that happens, the actin and myosin combine and you get actomyosin. So when your muscles contract, that's what happens. They kind of climbs the ladder like that. And then it relaxes and then it climbs the ladder again. And so these are the very finest of the muscle fibers. They combine together to make a myofibril. The myofibril, which is a whole bunch of these put together. And then there's a casing around that, which is like the collagen, and then those combine to make bigger fibers, bigger muscle. And so that's how the muscle builds. That's how the muscle is built. So in between all of this, in here, these in between parts, that's collagen, and it's your the connective tissue that holds it all together. And what we're looking at here is a cross section of this guy's arm, right? Question about that? You want me to run through that one more time? John, yes? No? Got it? Okay. So I don't think it's so important to know that, except to know that the muscle is a bunch of fibers and that are surrounded by a connective tissue. And what you really need to know about is the more active that muscle is, the tougher it is, right? And you can easily identify that with the round or the leg, right, is a tougher piece of meat than across the back, right, where there's not a lot of exercise going on. So the more collagen, the more active the muscle, the tougher the muscle is going to be, and the more collagen it's going to have. The connective tissue is the collagen and elastin. And so when we cook meat, the gelatin that comes out of the meat, that's what that is. The collagen is converted into gelatin when it's cooked with moisture. So any meat that has a lot of that is used a lot and has a lot of toughness to it, a lot of activity, is going to have a moist heat cooking method, or a moist heat cooking method, versus some meat that let's say the prime rib and the fillet across the back, they don't work too hard, they don't have a lot of connective tissue, and so we can cook them by dry heat methods. In order to extract the collagen, we must use moist heat. But you guys know all this, right? Yeah, been there, done that. Okay. So the protein that's in the meat is called myoglobin. And you can get a hint about what this protein's going to look like because it ends up in the word globin, which means it's a globular. While hemoglobin is the protein that's in your blood. So if you go and they draw blood, and they always check, what's the iron content of your hemoglobin, right? So that's the protein that's in your blood. But we're concerned about myoglobin because obviously when we cook, there is no, unless you're making blood sausage, we don't have to worry too much about that. So myoglobin is a globular protein with a little bit of iron right in the center. And when I talked before about shape, remember I talked about shape? So this is a really good example of what that shape is. So it's all wrapped around and protecting that little bit of iron that's on the inside. So that's where the color of meat comes from. The color of meat comes from the meat color comes from the myoglobin, the protein that's in the meat. There are 3 different colors: deoxymyoglobin, oxymyoglobin, and metmyoglobin. And for some reason, students have a lot of trouble with this. So please ask me some questions because people get these all confused. We'll start here with deoxy. What do you suppose deoxy means? Any guesses?
deoxygenation.
That's right. That's a really good one, Trevor. So deoxygen, that means no oxygen. And where do we find deoxymyoglobin? When do we find that?
When the
Um,
meat's exposed to air.
Before the meat is exposed to air. Great, right, John? Before. So when you cut into a cut of meat, what color is it? When you cut it, fresh, first thing, what color is it?
Bright
Purple.
red.
That's right. So deoxymyoglobin means no oxygen, purple, right? No oxygen, purple. Okay, you expose this piece of meat, you cut it, and almost immediately it turns bright red. Now we have oxymyoglobin, right? That means that it's exposed to oxygen, and the purple color, the myoglobin turns bright red. So an example of that is when you buy a good big chub of ground beef, right? And they don't oxygenate it before, and the inside is purple and the outside is bright red. Meaning being that the outside was exposed to oxygen and it's bright red, but the inside is not. As soon as you mix it up and add other stuff, it all turns bright red. So oxymyoglobin, oxygen in myoglobin, is bright red. After a while, after it's been exposed to too much oxygen, and as it gets older, old meat turns what color?
Brown.
Brown. Right. And that's called metamyoglobin. And that's what it causes. It's an oxidation reduction reaction.
And there's nothing wrong with the meat other than visually.
Correct. Unless it gets slimy.
Well, that's a whole nother level of yuck. But it's a great way to save money on really good meat when they mark it down as a manager special because it's in the metamyoglobin stage.
Correct. Right. As long as it's been well taken care of. Okay, so there's 3 stages. The myoglobin itself does not change. It becomes oxygenated, becomes oxygenated, turns red, and as it ages, it turns brown. It's called metamyoglobin. This part here, they show it here as, it can go back to purple. Not very often, right? I'm not sure why they show that. I don't think that happens very often. Question? All right, so you can think about deoxy, no oxygen, purple. Oxy, oxygen, red. Other one, brown. Okay. So the rainbow color in lunch meat does not necessarily mean it's bad, unless of course it's slimy. So I found this article on iridescent meat color if that fancies you, if you want to know, read more about that. So the Maillard reaction, one of our favorites, right? Because it makes things taste good and look pretty, right? It is also known as non-enzymatic browning. That's the same thing. Same thing, just 2 names, same thing, right? It's a very complex, so that means we don't need to know it, chemical reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars. And the reducing sugars have to do with a free double bond on an oxygen. But what we need to know about that is that all sugars, all monosaccharides and disaccharides, are reducing sugars except
Sucrose.
sucrose, right? Except sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar. So all monosaccharides and disaccharides. But you think, well, I put sugar in there. Well, the sugar actually separates, the glucose and fructose separates, so that now that you have a reducing sugar when when it comes into water. So anyway, so it's a chemical reaction. It's a dry heat reaction. Doesn't happen when there's water, right? It happens at high temperatures. Generally, we think of it as being good, but there are times when it isn't particularly good, like the discoloration of powdered milk and powdered milk and powdered egg. Notice that these are both dry, powdered, because it only happens in dry things. If there's moisture, it won't happen. And these two foods are desugared before they're dried.
Hey, Jill, remember we were talking before about the variability in the color of condensed milk? I
Uh-huh.
started paying attention to the browner ones, and I think they're older, so there may be Maillard browning happening in the can over time.
Maybe. Yes, because all the water is bound up in the sugar. Because we're
Yeah, I
talking
thought it
about
was a change in the processing temperatures or something, but same
no.
brands have it. And
Yeah, I think you might be onto something, Monto. I think that you're right because the water is bound, so it's essentially dry. So you could get some Maillard reaction going on there. It could turn browner. And because we know that happens when you heat it, right? When we heat the milk in the can and make that caramel milk, that's so good. Right. That's a good point. I think you're right. And sweetened condensed milk isn't sold very much anymore. It has a tendency to sit around a while. You could date your cans and keep them for a while and see what happens. So Maillard reaction is favored by high sugar content, high protein content, high temperatures, a basic pH, and a low water content. So those are all kinds of things that we see when we're like browning a piece of meat or baking bread or, those kinds of things. Questions? So Matt brought up in a previous class, he said it isn't always a good thing, right? Maillard's not always a good thing. So sometimes like in self-stable products over time, like we were talking about the sweetened condensed milk. And then he added some other stuff about how to keep it from happening. So if it's a problem. This section talks about marination and a maceration. Right? So marination is for meat, fish, and poultry. Maceration is the term that's used for fruits and vegetables as they're aged and similarly treated. When we marinate, we're particularly interested in water holding capacity. So the more water that we can get to be held in the meat product, the juicier and more tender it's going to be. So we're interested in water holding capacity, right?
And the higher your profit margin because you're selling less food and more water.
Absolutely true. Right. Very important,
The
very important to
American
keep the
way.
business going, right? Yes. So pH changes if you add an acid changes the pH from the isoelectric point. So the isoelectric point is the point where it's neither acidic or basic. It's where it acts as both an acid or a base. It's the isoelectric point or neutral point. So if you can make it more acidic or more basic, you can increase the water activity. Alkaline phosphates do that by making the meat more basic, right? Alkaline phosphates increase protein solubility and enhance water binding ability. Ionic strength salts increase meat's water holding capacity and increase yield. They add stickiness to the meat so that it'll stay together when you make formed meat products. Proteolytic enzymes increase tenderize by breaking down the structure of the meat, right? By breaking those proteins into individual parts. The examples, the most common one is papain, right? Papain is from papaya, and that's what is in Adolph's meat tenderizer. So I always tell the story. I went for a facial one time, and the girl says to me, I said, "What are you putting on my face?" And she says, "Exotic tropical enzymes from the papaya plant." I put, "What? You're putting meat tenderizer on my face?" Right? Which is exactly what she was doing. But she went, "Whoa." Not supposed to know that. Anyway, but unfortunately, when we put those on there, it doesn't go into the food very far. And if we use too much, we get mushy meat, right? Mushy meat, bad. So they don't work as well. You probably should know the formula. You probably already know it. The percentage of marinade pickup. So the marinated weight minus the raw weight divided by the raw weight times 100 is your percentage of pickup. So that's what I have. Oh, shut up. Dala, leave it. We're working on that part. Okay, that's what I have. Oh my God, I'm done early. Can't possibly be. Does anybody have any questions about this or anything else? Man, I managed to get through this one without messing up too badly. Oops. Anybody, any questions? Oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat, which I completely ignored.
I'm interested in this high protein diet.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'm looking at the chat. So somebody looked up
Super fat pigs.
super fat pigs. Somebody looked up, yeah, Trevor, you put in there. So the reference band is 5'8" and 175 pounds. So I had the right height.
Yeah.
The right height.
I haven't seen an adult male in the United States with those stats since like the third grade. And he was a third grader.
Oh, my grandson is 5'8", but he's skinny. He only weighs 140 pounds. So
How old is he?
17.
There you go.
Yeah, and I think the reference woman is 5'5" and 150 pounds.
That seems kind of archaic and scary because 68% of the male population in the United States can be considered morbidly obese.
Right. But this
And morbidly obese would take about 3 or 4 of those standard people that these numbers are based off of.
Yeah, but this is not the average man. which is what you're talking about. This is the reference man. So this is what the nutrient.
Well, then how can we base believable numbers off of a reference man that doesn't exist?
Well, there must be one out there somewhere.
Well,
But
yeah, but when people are, concerning their health or considering a diet for a normal person, the numbers that they're looking at from the World Health Organization or the recommended daily allowance are based on a guy that doesn't exist.
well, so this is the reference guy. So let's say you're 6 feet tall or
Which
six,
I am.
right?
I'm
So you
average.
would
I'm every
increase
guy.
you would increase these based on your increased size.
Right, but the
Yeah.
average Joe doesn't know to do that.
No, right. So
So there should be like some kind of like, hey, this is based off of 5'8", 175 pounds.
so well, this is what the food label is based on, the nutritional recommendations on the food label.
Right.
And obviously and we could even talk about an easier concept is like a 2,000 calorie diet. So that's what the food label is based on. So 2,000 calories is a little bit too many for a mature woman, right?
Right.
And not enough for a man because a man is bigger and has a higher metabolism. So
And if they're active or if they're sedentary in their lifestyle.
right. And so you have to take all those things into consideration. So I would probably look and say, no, maybe 1,800 calories, or maybe if I was really inactive, 1,500 calories, which is the lowest that you can go and get a nutritionally adequate diet. But somebody who's 6 feet and very active might get 3,000 calories. So it just kind of depends on where you are. This is just a reference. It's not meant really for us to base our diet on.
Right. Well, I mean, for us being in the industry, like it makes sense and we get it,
Yeah,
but we're not the vast majority of
no,
American
no.
consumers, and the
But we
vast
would,
majority are like, what does this mean? 2,000 calories?
right, but we wouldn't want to raise it up, which would encourage people to be fatter. Right.
No, we shouldn't raise it up, but we should consider educating people.
Yeah. Well, we try.
Yeah,
Ben wants you to know that he's 5'9" and weighs 175
I
pounds.
see that.
So they do exist, right?
I'm 6 foot and 177.
So very good, very good. So you're a little bit on the thin side. So that's when we look at body mass index, right? So then, which
Ooh,
is
those are the most scary
relationship
numbers on the
of
planet.
waist, circumference, and height.
Is body
Yeah.
mass index based on fat, or is that just a proportion of meat to muscle, meat to bone? Do you know?
Well, I can tell you, my trainer is about 5'8" and about 220, and
Right,
he's a solid brick house.
right.
However,
Yeah.
based on BMI, which are archaic BS numbers, his insurance company premiums are based off somebody morbidly obese because of his body dimensions. He doesn't have an ounce of fat on his body.
Yes.
But again,
That's what I
according
was
to
thinking.
archaic BMI numbers, he's morbidly obese.
Okay, so yeah, and that's one of the that's definitely a limitation of the body mass index, right? So body mass index is well, whoops. I messed it up. It's
I'm
it's
skinny.
right. It's
Proud of that.
yeah, it's based on its weight to height.
Right.
Right. So
So
obviously
he's a short guy
it does
made
not
of solid muscle.
right. It did not take into account muscle and mass and bone mass. Right.
Yeah.
So again, it's just an indicator, and we should always we have to take those other things into consideration.
We should always use common sense.
Common sense, right?
Okay, I'm done.
You're,
Your fault.
that's okay, Trevor. This is, you're passionate about this, and this is really good, right? And one number never works for everybody. We don't apply the recommended dietary allowances we only apply that as a guideline for healthy people. And for most things like the vitamins and minerals, it doesn't, it is not going to vary very much based on your height or age. But for calories, obviously varies a lot. And but the percentages of carbohydrate, lipids, and proteins don't change that much. And body mass index is limited because of it doesn't take into account muscle mass and bone. So they're we just added them all together, right? So
Yeah.
good discussion though. I appreciate that. I always like questions. This kind of stuff's a lot more interesting to talk about. Let me stop the recording here before.